The afternoon I came home early and found my daughter-in-law standing in my bedroom, rifling through my dresser drawers. She jumped like she'd been caught committing a crime and stammered out an excuse about looking for safety pins. But the drawers she'd been searching had nothing to do with sewing supplies. What I discovered she was really after made me realize that the young woman my son had married was far more calculating than I'd ever imagined. Some people don't just marry into families, they hunt through them for what they can take. Before I tell you about the day I caught my daughter-in-law in my bedroom, I need to tell you about Ashley and how she came into our family, because understanding who she presented herself to be makes the truth of who she really was that much more shocking. My son Kevin met Ashley at a charity fundraiser where he was volunteering. Kevin had always been the generous one in our family, the type who spent his weekends at food banks and community centers, who organized clothing drives and tutored kids after school. He worked as an accountant during the week, but his passion was helping others. Ashley had been working at the fundraiser too, or so she said. She told Kevin she volunteered regularly with various charities, that giving back to the community was important to her. She talked about her work with homeless shelters and women's organizations. She seemed to share Kevin's values about service and compassion. Kevin called me the week after they met, excited in a way I hadn't heard him in years. He said he'd met someone special, someone who understood his commitment to making a difference. He said Ashley was beautiful, yes, but more importantly, she was kind and caring and dedicated to helping people. They dated for 8 months before Kevin proposed. During that time, I got to know Ashley, or at least I thought I did. She was sweet and attentive, always asking about my health and my life. She'd help me clean up after family dinners without being asked. She'd compliment my cooking and ask for recipes. She seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our family. She told me about her difficult childhood. Her mother had died when she was young, she said, and her father had struggled with addiction. She'd been raised by her grandmother, who had passed away a few years ago. She was essentially alone in the world, which was why Kevin's family meant so much to her. I felt for her. The thought of this young woman having no family, no support system, no mother to help her plan her wedding or grandmother to pass down wisdom, it touched my heart. I told her that she was part of our family now, that I'd be there for her like a mother. She hugged me and cried, saying that meant everything to her. She said she'd always wanted a real family, people who loved her and accepted her. She said marrying Kevin was like being given a second chance at having the family she'd lost. The wedding was modest but lovely. Ashley said she didn't have money for an elaborate celebration, and she didn't want Kevin to go into debt for a single day. She said what mattered was the marriage, not the wedding. I appreciated her practicality and her values. On her side of the church, there were only a handful of people, a few friends from work, a distant cousin, a former teacher who'd been important to her. It reinforced the story she'd told about being alone in the world. My heart ached for her, this young woman, with so few people to celebrate her happiness. After the wedding, Kevin and Ashley moved into a small apartment about 20 minutes from my house. They seemed happy. Kevin would tell me about their life together, about cooking dinners and watching movies and planning for their future. Ashley had quit her job to focus on volunteering, he said, and Kevin was happy to support them both on his accountant's salary. I'd invite them over for Sunday dinners, and Ashley would come bearing small gifts, flowers from the farmer's market, a candle she thought I'd like, a book she'd found that reminded her of me. She was thoughtful and considerate, everything you'd want in a daughter-in-law. She'd ask me about my late husband Henry, about our marriage and our life together. She seemed genuinely interested in my stories, laughing at the funny parts and tearing up at the sad ones. She said she hoped her marriage with Kevin would be as strong and lasting as mine had been with Henry. About 6 months into the marriage, Ashley started asking questions about family history. She wanted to know about our ancestors, where the family came from, what traditions we had. She said she was creating a family tree, wanting to learn about the heritage she'd married into since she had so little of her own family history to draw on. I thought it was sweet. I showed her old photos, told her stories about my parents and grandparents, explained what I knew about the family lineage. She took notes, asked detailed questions, seemed fascinated by every detail. She was particularly interested in my mother's side of the family. She asked about my maiden name, about where my mother's family had lived, about whether there were any family estates or properties. I told her what I knew: we were working-class people, no grand estates, just hard-working folks who'd built modest lives. She seemed disappointed by that, though she tried to hide it. She said she'd hoped there might be interesting historical connections, maybe ties to important events or notable people. I laughed and said our family's importance came from our character, not our connections to history or wealth. Then Ashley started asking about jewelry and family heirlooms. Did I have pieces that had been passed down? Were there items of sentimental or monetary value that had family significance? She said she was asking because she wanted to know what might someday be passed to her and Kevin's children, wanting to understand the family legacy. I showed her a few things: my mother's simple wedding band, a brooch that had belonged to my grandmother, a locket with photos of my parents. Nothing particularly valuable but meaningful to me. Ashley examined each piece carefully, asking about its history and value. She seemed frustrated that there wasn't more. She'd say things like wondering if there might be other pieces I'd forgotten about, or whether other family members might have items I didn't know about. I told her that what she saw was essentially all there was. We weren't a family that accumulated valuable possessions. Around this time, Ashley started visiting me more often when Kevin was at work. She'd say she was in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by for coffee. She'd ask to use the bathroom and would be gone for longer than seemed necessary. She'd volunteer to help me with chores around the house, insisting on going upstairs to change sheets or organize closets. At the time, I thought she was just being helpful. I appreciated having the company and the assistance. I was getting older, and some tasks were harder than they used to be. Having my daughter-in-law want to spend time with me felt like a blessing. She'd ask casual questions about where I kept important documents. She said it was for safety reasons. What if something happened to me? Kevin should know where to find insurance papers and legal documents. She said her grandmother's death had been complicated because no one could find important papers, and she didn't want Kevin to go through that. I told her that my lawyer had copies of everything important and that Kevin knew how to contact him, but she pressed, saying it would be easier if Kevin knew exactly where things were kept in my house. Eventually, I told her I kept important papers in a filing cabinet in my home office, just to stop her from worrying about it. She asked to see the office, saying she wanted to make sure she could direct Kevin to the right place if needed. I showed her, pointed out the filing cabinet. She said she hoped she'd never need the information, but it gave her peace of mind to know. Looking back, there were so many warning signs. But when you trust someone, when you believe they're family and they have good intentions, you interpret odd behavior generously. You tell yourself they're just being thoughtful, just being prepared, just being considerate. Then came the day that shattered all my generous interpretations. It was a Wednesday afternoon in October. I'd gone to my regular weekly hair appointment, something I'd been doing at the same salon for 20 years, always on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Everyone knew my schedule. Family, friends, even the mail carrier knew I wouldn't be home Wednesday afternoons. But that particular Wednesday, my stylist called the night before. She'd had a family emergency and needed to cancel all her appointments. She offered to reschedule me for Thursday, and I agreed. So Wednesday afternoon, instead of being at the salon, I was at home. I'd done some gardening, made myself lunch, was enjoying the quiet of the house. Around 3 o'clock, I decided to go upstairs and change out of my gardening clothes. As I approached my bedroom, I heard sounds, drawers opening and closing, soft rustling. Someone was in my room. My first thought was that Kevin had stopped by, though I couldn't imagine why he'd be going through my dresser. but his car wasn't in the driveway, and surely he would have called out when he came in. My heart started pounding. Someone had broken into my house. I thought about calling 911, but my phone was downstairs in my purse. I thought about confronting whoever was in there, but at my age, what could I do against an intruder? Then I heard a voice I recognized. Ashley, talking to herself in a frustrated whisper. She was saying something about where would an old woman keep something, and why was everything so disorganized. I stood in the hallway, frozen, trying to understand what I was hearing. My daughter-in-law was in my bedroom, going through my things, muttering about me in a tone I'd never heard her use before. It wasn't the sweet, considerate Ashley I knew. This voice was cold, calculating, annoyed. I pushed open the door. Ashley was standing at my dresser, the top drawer pulled out, its contents scattered on the bed. She had her back to me, so focused on her search that she didn't hear me come in. I asked her what she was doing. She spun around so fast she knocked over the small jewelry box that had been sitting on top of the dresser. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, panic, then a forced smile. She said she'd stopped by to visit and had been looking for safety pins. She said her skirt had a loose hem and she'd thought I might have pins in my bedroom. She gestured at the open drawer, trying to make the story sound plausible. But the drawer she'd been searching through was where I kept undergarments and socks. No one would look there for safety pins. And the bed was covered with items from multiple drawers, not just one drawer that might conceivably have sewing supplies. I told her that safety pins were kept in the sewing basket downstairs, as she surely knew since she'd borrowed pins before. I asked her again what she was really doing in my bedroom. Ashley's expression changed. The fake sweetness dropped away, replaced by something harder. She said she'd been looking for something that belonged to her family, something she had reason to believe I was keeping from her. I was completely confused. I asked her what she thought I had that belonged to her family. She said it was complicated, but that she'd learned I might have something that was rightfully hers, and she'd been trying to find it. I told her that I had nothing of hers, that I didn't understand what she was talking about. She needed to explain herself, and she needed to explain why she'd been going through my private belongings without permission. Ashley sat down on my bed, and what she told me in the next few minutes completely changed my understanding of who she was and why she'd married my son. She said that her entire story about her childhood had been a lie. Her mother hadn't died young, she was alive and had never been a good parent. Her father didn't struggle with addiction, he'd never been in her life at all. Her grandmother hadn't raised her, she'd been raised by her mother and a series of her mother's boyfriends. But one thing she'd told me was true. She was searching for family connections, just not for the sentimental reasons she'd claimed. Ashley explained that her mother had told her a story years ago about her own mother, Ashley's grandmother, who had been involved with a wealthy man decades ago. The relationship had ended badly, and Ashley's grandmother had never received anything from this man despite his substantial wealth. Ashley's mother believed that this man, Ashley's grandfather, had died and left money or property that should have gone to his daughter, Ashley's mother, but that somehow the inheritance had been denied or hidden. She'd spent years trying to track down information about this man and his family, trying to prove her claim to what she believed was rightfully hers. When Ashley's mother found out that this man had lived in our city, she'd encouraged Ashley to investigate. Ashley had done research, had traced family trees and property records, and had come to believe that I or my late husband Henry might have some connection to this wealthy man or his estate. The charity fundraiser where Ashley met Kevin hadn't been a coincidence. She'd found out Kevin volunteered there and had shown up deliberately, hoping to meet him and get close to our family. The 8 months of dating hadn't been about falling in love, it had been about positioning herself to access family information and potentially find evidence of this supposed inheritance. She'd married Kevin to gain access to the family, to search for documents or items that might prove her claim to money she believed she was owed. All the questions about family history, all the interest in heirlooms, all the requests to help organize my house, it had all been about getting opportunities to search for evidence. I sat down in the chair by my bedroom window, trying to process what I was hearing. This young woman had deceived my son, had deceived me, had entered our family under completely false pretenses. She'd married Kevin not because she loved him, but because she was hunting for money she thought we might know about or have access to. I asked her if Kevin knew any of this. She said no, that Kevin believed the same story everyone else did. She said she'd planned to tell him eventually, once she'd found what she was looking for and could prove her claim. She said she'd actually come to care for Kevin over time, that her feelings weren't entirely fake, but that her primary purpose in marrying him remained unchanged. I asked her what made her think we had anything to do with this wealthy man she was searching for. She pulled out her phone and showed me documents she'd been compiling. Property records, family trees, old newspaper articles. She'd built an elaborate theory based on coincidental name similarities and geographic proximity. According to her research, this wealthy man had owned property in the same neighborhood where Henry's family had lived decades ago. She believed there might have been business connections between the families. She thought that if Henry's family had known this man, there might be documents or information in our possession that could help her prove her claim to his estate. It was all speculation and circumstantial. There were no real connections, just Ashley's desperate desire to believe there was money out there that belonged to her, and her willingness to deceive everyone around her to find it. I told her that Henry's family had no connection to wealthy estates or mysterious inheritances. They'd been working people, just like my family. Whatever fantasy her mother had constructed about owed inheritances and hidden money, it had nothing to do with us. Ashley became defensive. She said I might not know about the connections, that things could have been hidden from me. She said her research was solid, that the connections were there even if I didn't see them. She said she had a right to explore possibilities, to look for what belonged to her family. I told her that what she had a right to do was tell the truth to her husband. She'd married him under false pretenses. She'd spent months, possibly over a year now, deceiving him about who she was and what she wanted. Kevin deserved to know the truth about the woman he'd married. Ashley's demeanor changed. She got hard and cold in a way I'd never seen before. She said that if I told Kevin the truth, she'd deny everything. She'd say I was getting old and confused, that I was making up stories. She'd say I'd never accepted her and was trying to drive a wedge between her and Kevin. She said Kevin loved her and trusted her. He'd believe her over me, and if I pushed the issue, if I tried to break them up, I'd be the one who lost Kevin. He'd choose his wife over his mother, and I'd end up alone. Then she said that she hadn't found anything yet, but she wasn't done looking. She'd been going through my house room by room when she had opportunities, and she'd continue doing so until she'd eliminated every possibility. She implied that she'd find ways to search more thoroughly, perhaps when I was sleeping or when I was away from home for extended periods. The threat was clear. She wasn't just going to continue deceiving Kevin, she was going to keep invading my privacy, going through my belongings, searching my home whenever she could find opportunities. I told her to get out of my house. She stood up, straightened her clothes, and that fake sweet smile returned. She said she hoped we could keep this conversation between us, that there was no need to upset Kevin with misunderstandings. She said she'd see me at Sunday dinner, and she walked out like nothing had happened. I sat in my bedroom for a long time after she left, surrounded by my scattered belongings, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to call Kevin immediately and tell him everything. But Ashley was right about one thing: Kevin loved her, and breaking that truth to him would devastate him. I also knew that Ashley would deny everything and try to make me look confused or malicious. Without proof of her real motivations, it would be her word against mine. Kevin would be caught in the middle, forced to choose between his wife and his mother. But I couldn't just do nothing. Ashley had invaded my home, violated my privacy, and was planning to continue doing so. She'd deceived my son into a marriage built on lies. She was using our family to pursue a fantasy inheritance that didn't exist. I decided I needed evidence before I confronted Kevin. I needed proof that Ashley had been lying about who she was and why she'd married him. I spent the next few days thinking about how to get that evidence. Then, I remembered something. Ashley had shown me her research on her phone, the documents she'd compiled about property records and family connections. If I could get access to that research, I could show Kevin what Ashley had really been doing. But I couldn't get access to her phone without her knowledge. I needed another approach. I called my friend Dorothy, who'd helped me through various crises over the years. I explained the situation, told her everything Ashley had revealed. Dorothy was furious on my and Kevin's behalf. She said we needed to set a trap, get Ashley to reveal her true intentions in a way that could be documented. Together, we came up with a plan. It would require me to lie to Ashley, to manipulate her the way she'd been manipulating us. I didn't like it, but I couldn't see another option. I called Ashley and asked if she could come over. I said I'd been thinking about our conversation, and I'd found something she might be interested in. I implied that I'd discovered an old document in Henry's papers that mentioned the wealthy man she'd been asking about. Ashley arrived within an hour. She tried to maintain her usual sweet demeanor, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. She thought she was finally going to find what she'd been looking for. I had Dorothy hidden in my home office with her phone set to record. I told Ashley the document was upstairs in a box of Henry's papers. As we went up, I asked her to remind me exactly what she was looking for, what this was all about. I said I wanted to understand before I showed her what I'd found. Ashley, thinking she was about to get what she wanted, became less guarded. She started explaining her mother's theory, her own research, how she'd identified our family as potential connections. She talked about how she'd targeted Kevin deliberately, how the fundraiser meeting hadn't been chance. She admitted that she didn't really love Kevin the way a wife should, but that he was kind and useful, and she'd grown fond of him. She said once she found proof of her claim to the inheritance, she'd be wealthy and could decide then whether to stay married or not. She said Kevin would be fine either way. He'd had a nice marriage for a while, and if she left him with some of the money, he'd be better off than before. She was so focused on the possibility of finding this document that she didn't realize she was confessing everything. When we got to my bedroom, I told Ashley there was no document. I'd lied to get her to come over and tell me the truth. She realized immediately that she'd been trapped. She looked around, saw Dorothy emerge from the office with her phone, and understood that everything had been recorded. Ashley's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, fear. She said we couldn't use that recording, that it was illegal to record someone without their consent. Dorothy, who'd done research on this, said that in our state only one party needed to consent to a recording, and I had consented. The recording was perfectly legal. Ashley tried a different approach. She said she'd tell Kevin that I'd invited her over and harassed her, forced her to say things, manipulated her into a false confession. She said Kevin would never forgive me for setting up his wife. I told her that Kevin was actually on his way over. I'd called him before Ashley arrived and asked him to come to my house. I'd told him there was something important about Ashley that he needed to know. He'd be arriving any minute. The color drained from Ashley's face. She said I was ruining everything, that she'd spent over a year setting this up, that she deserved to find out if there was money owed to her family. She said I had no right to take away her chance at financial security. I told her that her supposed claim to some inheritance was a fantasy built on coincidences and desperation. There was no money owed to her family. Even if there had been, she'd gone about pursuing it in the most deceptive and hurtful way possible. She'd betrayed my son, invaded my privacy, and built an entire marriage on lies. Kevin arrived to find Ashley in tears, Dorothy with her phone, and me looking exhausted and sad. He immediately asked what was happening. I told him he needed to listen to something, and Dorothy played the recording. Kevin's face, as he listened to Ashley's confession, was heartbreaking. He heard her admit that their meeting had been calculated, that the charity fundraiser had been targeted, that her interest in him had been about accessing our family. He heard her say she didn't really love him, that he was kind and useful, that she'd decide whether to stay married once she found money. When the recording ended, Kevin looked at Ashley like she was a stranger. He asked if it was true. She tried to say it had been taken out of context, that I'd manipulated her, that she'd been confused. But Kevin had heard her words in her own voice. There was no misunderstanding. Kevin asked her to confirm one thing. Had she married him to search for information about some supposed inheritance? After a long pause, Ashley said yes, but that she'd come to care for him anyway, that it wasn't all fake. Kevin told her he wanted a divorce. She started crying, saying he couldn't throw away their marriage over a misunderstanding. He said it wasn't a misunderstanding, their entire marriage had been based on a lie she'd told. She'd never loved him, never been the person she'd claimed to be. Ashley left, still crying and protesting. Kevin stayed at my house, sitting at the kitchen table in shock. He said he felt like an idiot for not seeing the truth. He said there had been small signs: her interest in family documents, her questions about property and inheritance, the way she'd pushed to be helpful in ways that gave her access to different parts of my house. But he'd interpreted everything generously, never imagining her motivations were so calculated. Over the next few weeks, Kevin moved forward with divorce proceedings. Ashley tried to fight it, claiming she'd been the victim of entrapment and that she truly loved Kevin. But Kevin had heard her confession, had seen who she really was. He couldn't get past the betrayal. During the divorce process, Kevin's attorney did some investigating into Ashley's background. They found that much of what she'd told us was lies. Her mother was alive and had a history of similar schemes, trying to claim inheritances she believed she was owed based on flimsy family connections. Ashley had learned the behavior from her mother. They also found that Ashley had targeted other families before ours. There was a pattern of her befriending people, getting close to families she believed might have connections to money or property, then searching for evidence to support inheritance claims. She'd done it in other cities with other men. Kevin hadn't been her first victim. The supposed wealthy grandfather and the inheritance that was owed to Ashley's family turned out to be real, but the money had been settled decades ago through the legal system. Ashley's grandmother had been awarded a small settlement that she'd received and spent. There was no hidden fortune, no wrongfully denied inheritance. Just Ashley and her mother's delusion that they were owed more than they'd gotten. Kevin struggled emotionally with the revelation that his marriage had been a lie. He went to therapy to work through his feelings of betrayal and to understand how he'd been manipulated. He blamed himself for not seeing the truth earlier. I tried to help him understand that Ashley had been skilled at deception. She'd built an entire false identity, maintained it consistently for over a year. She'd studied what Kevin valued: service, compassion, family, and had presented herself as embodying those values. Anyone could have been fooled by someone that calculating. The divorce was finalized after several months. Ashley tried one last time to get money from Kevin, claiming she deserved compensation for the time she'd invested in the marriage. Kevin's attorney shut that down quickly, pointing out that the marriage had been fraudulent from the start. After the divorce, I had all the locks changed on my house. I also installed a security system with cameras. I wasn't taking chances that Ashley might try to return and continue searching. The cameras would catch anyone trying to enter without permission. Ashley moved away, probably to find another family to target with her inheritance schemes. We heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been seen in another city, volunteering at charity events, presumably looking for her next mark. Kevin slowly rebuilt his life. He dated cautiously, finding it hard to trust again after Ashley's betrayal. He eventually met a woman named Lisa who was patient with his guardedness and understood why he needed time to believe in people again. The experience taught me several important lessons. First, that people can be extraordinarily good at presenting false versions of themselves. Ashley had maintained her act for over a year, never slipping, always playing the role of devoted daughter-in-law and loving wife. Second, that desperation can drive people to terrible choices. Ashley's belief that she was owed money had led her to deceive an innocent man, violate an elderly woman's privacy, and waste years pursuing a fantasy. Third, that protecting family sometimes means being willing to be seen as the villain temporarily. When I set up that trap for Ashley, I knew she'd try to make me look manipulative, but I also knew Kevin deserved to know the truth about the woman he'd married. Fourth, that evidence matters. If I'd gone to Kevin without proof, it would have been my word against Ashley's, and Kevin might have chosen to believe his wife. The recording gave him undeniable evidence of Ashley's real motivations. And finally, that home should be a place of safety and privacy. Ashley had violated that repeatedly, going through my belongings, searching my home, invading my space. Installing security measures wasn't paranoid, it was necessary protection. The afternoon I caught my daughter-in-law searching through my bedroom, I thought I was catching a simple violation of privacy. What I actually discovered was a calculated deception that had been going on for more than a year, a marriage built on lies, and a young woman so desperate for money she didn't exist that she'd betrayed everyone around her. Ashley was looking for documents or evidence that would support her fantasy inheritance claim. What she found instead was that deception always comes to light eventually, and that using people in pursuit of money you're not actually owed destroys any chance of genuine connection or happiness. Kevin lost a year of his life to Ashley's lies. I lost my trust in my ability to read people. We both learned that sometimes the people who seem sweetest and most devoted are actually the most skilled at hiding their true intentions. But we also learned that truth, even painful truth, is better than living in a comfortable lie. Kevin is now building a real relationship with someone who genuinely cares for him. I have my home secured and my privacy protected, and Ashley is somewhere else, probably still searching for money that doesn't exist, probably still deceiving new families. Some people marry for love, some marry for convenience, and some, like Ashley, marry for what they think they can find by gaining access to a family's private papers and possessions. The day I caught her in my bedroom, I learned which type of person she really was. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more true stories about deception, family betrayals, and the importance of protecting yourself from people who see relationships as opportunities for exploitation. Have you ever discovered that someone in your life was using you for hidden purposes? Have you caught someone going through your private belongings without permission, or learned that someone married into your family for reasons other than love? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and this community is here to support each other through these difficult situations. Remember, if someone in your life is asking too many questions about family finances, property, or inheritances, or showing unusual interest in your private documents and belongings, trust your instincts. Not everyone who seems kind and devoted has genuine intentions. Document everything, protect your privacy, and don't be afraid to verify people's stories when something feels off. And if you discover deception in your family, gather evidence before confronting the situation. Proof matters when someone is skilled at lying. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.